we're going through this series, Today's Worries and Timeless Hope. And it's trying to really get in and pry into the human psyche and take a look at things that we're worried about and that we have concern about. Maybe we're just downright scared of. And so that's what this thing has been all about. And to some degree, we were talking about the idea of truth or authenticity the last couple of weeks and just what that means to our culture versus what that means to God, and therefore what it should mean to His church. And so, really want to dig in on that and wanted to just explore that idea. And today we're changing tracks to some degree, and we're still talking about things that people were worried about and really should be worried about. And today I want to talk about the concept of basically loneliness. And if you got kids, there's probably times you wish you could be lonely. I can still remember seeing little hands reaching underneath the door while I'm in the bathroom. I'm like, dude, just I barely got any of that, but Tanya, she got a lot of it. Um, that's just, I mean, it comes with the territory. And but there's a difference I've learned between having company and not being lonely. Um, we can have some company when we got our kids around. We can have company while we're at work or in the grocery store or whatever, but we can still be walking around because we just we don't have real connections there, and that's what I'm really talking about. Is real connections with people that we can share our life with, and want to kind of dig in on this idea. Um, and it's something that's been getting progressively worse through the years. Uh, for example, back in I can't remember what year it was. I remember reading that Great Britain, the United Kingdom, had introduced a brand new ministry called the Ministry of Loneliness. And it was all about government trying to tackle this problem that people were lonely. And it really is a problem because we just reaches some of the problems it creates. Um, for example, studies have looked at and shown that loneliness is a worse health risk than smoking or high blood pressure or even obesity. It affects, um, it makes us more susceptible, obviously, to anxiety and depression. Um, it actually makes us slower to recover from illnesses. So you get common cold and you're alone, you're going to have it a while longer than somebody who's connected. I don't understand that, but there it is. It's one of those weird things. Um, People who are lonely have a higher tendency towards violence and antisocial behavior, which is definitely a bad thing because we got a guy in here who works for the postal office. And we don't need him going postal.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Hopefully not ever. Uh, but at any rate, um, so I mean, there's that, and then there's the painfully obvious one. There's a higher suicide rate. I mean, people who are lonely just get more depressed. Greater depression means higher rates of suicide. Some of these can't take it anymore. And this is just part of our world. It's ironic that social media was meant to connect us better than ever, and in some ways it has, but in some ways it's made things worse. We take this idea of putting out a post on whatever your social media platform preference is, and it's like, hey, let everybody know what's going on today. But it's not a connection. It's not like you're having a conversation with your mom or your friend from work or whatever, saying, hey, this is what's been going on. And they can turn around, they can ask questions and interact and make it a conversation instead of just, like 10, 20, 30, 40 words or whatever the Twitter limit of characters is. I don't remember anymore. Or sorry, all of the Twitter is X now. But at any rate, it doesn't build a real connection, which is the inherent flaw in the system, is that it makes us think that we're connected because we're letting everybody know what's going on in our lives. And we're seeing what's going on in theirs, and so we feel like we're connected. When the simple fact is we're just up to date. And there's value in that. That's kind of why I got on Facebook way back when, was I wanted to know what was going on in people's lives that I hadn't seen, didn't live around. And so just to know what was going on. I've got family in the Northwest United States, in Idaho, in Oregon, Northern California, and I don't always get to see them. Sometimes I go for years without seeing them, especially the family I've got now in Idaho. I haven't seen for 6 years. And there's nothing, no, not quite that long. Probably like 4 years. And there's nothing on the horizon where I'm going to get to see them again. So things like Facebook help me know what's going on in their lives. But anytime I see an update from that family, I'll be honest with you, I don't feel the need to call them up and say, hey, look, I saw something's going on. Tell me about it. I don't take the time to actually connect. Does it do that for you guys? I mean, every once in a while we will. Usually if it's a closer friend. But that's kind of the problem, is that not all of us have closer friends. Matter of fact, it is a study. And like back in 1985, which I realize we have at least a couple people for sure who weren't here in 85. But back in 1985, the average person had like 3 people they could confide in. So I'm talking about, back up the emotional dump truck and just let it rip. 3 people. Okay, maybe it was your mom, maybe it was your best friend from college, and your spouse. I don't know, whoever it was. Maybe you just have that close group of 4 friends. The 4 of you guys were like 4 musketeers, or you're inseparable. But whatever it was back in the 80s, 1985. Now, 25% of people say they have no one. In the same article I got this information from said that pretty much the average was 0. It's just scary. We have that hard of a time connecting. And why, again, I think the biggest problem is that we feel like we're connected. We feel like it's good enough. And the problem is that it's not. We just want to settle because it's easier. We don't have to have that emotional dump truck come and pour out on us. And that makes things easier, and I get that. And it's hard to be vulnerable. It just is. We don't do that naturally. We don't do that easily. No one likes feeling vulnerable. And so it's just easier to avoid it. Easier to just hold it all in, and I'll just pour my heart out to, I don't know. Yeah, Philip, there you go. But that's not what we were made for. We were made for human connection. I mean, stop and think about it. The Bible talks about in Genesis chapter 2, God created Adam. He created all these animals, then he created Adam, took him through the exercise, naming all these animals, not because, any qualification or anything, but the main reason is that God wanted Adam, at least this is what most theologians tell me, is that the reason God had Adam name all those animals in one fell swoop is that he wanted Adam to realize that there was nothing else out there that was like him. That as great as dogs are, or cats, if you're a cat person, for those weirdos out there, um, they're not a substitute for people. God looked at Adam and he told us, basically said, hey, it's not good for man to be alone. And that's just as true for us as it was for Adam. It's not good for us to be alone. We need these connections. But the ironic part is that when things start happening in our lives, that's when we like to pull back. That's like, okay, I don't want to deal with all of this. I don't want to have to pour it out. So I'm going to pull back because usually the bad stuff starts happening, and somebody drops off from going to church, or they when their friends call, say, hey, we want to go to the movies or whatever it is. We want to go grab some dinner. You want to come along? You're like, no, not tonight. And so we pull back. And those are the times we need to. And it's just so counterintuitive because that's when we got to pour the work in for relationships. If we want to have somebody to confide in, you've got to be a friend. You've got to be a confidant. You've got to be somebody who can listen to somebody, back up the emotional dump truck, pour it all out, help them process through it. And maybe you don't have any advice. Maybe it's just you just listen. That's one of those pieces of marriage advice I got years ago. Is that, hey, when your wife starts telling you about something, just ask, okay, do you need me to help you fix this, or do you need to just maybe just listen? Sometimes that's all we need is somebody to listen. Someone just be there and hear and understand what we're going through. And so, like, and we build these connections and we have these understandings between people so that, like, if you're having a problem with, I don't know, your mother-in-law, and you tell your best friend, and your best friend's over at your house one day, and your mother-in-law comes over, and there's something that happens with the mother-in-law, all you gotta do is, like, look at that best friend, and you don't have to say a word. There's this understanding that comes in because you've communicated that person. The person knows what this mother-in-law is doing to your home. And I mean, that's just an example. That's kind of a stereotype, but you get the idea. Whatever the problem is, you got somebody you can share it with. And sometimes, once you've communicated that, you don't necessarily have to say anything. You can have that moment of understanding, that moment of connection without words. That's beautiful. That's what friendships are supposed to be like. Job, when he lost everything, he had three friends, and despite the bad advice and the fact that they kept telling him, hey, it's your fault, you need to repent, you're doing something wrong later on. To begin with, they did probably the best thing they could have possibly done. Job had just lost almost his whole family. And these friends come in and they just sit down next to him. And they're there for him. Not a word. They're just there for him. One of the things I've told my boys is that, like, in my mind, a great first date is going to a movie. Why? Because you can go do something together, common experience, and there's no talking needed. You can just get a little more comfortable in each other's presence. And from there, you're a little bit more comfortable, the conversation can start to flow a little more easily. All by just going and having a shared experience where you didn't have to talk. Beautiful things come out of that. So I read off a list of the things that are the dangers that come along with this. Like, it's worse for your health than smoking or high blood pressure or obesity. I want to read you some of the benefits that happen when we actually have real human connections. Okay? So first of all, apparently this leads to a 50% chance of increased longevity. So the odds improve for you to live Maybe that's because your friends are there to talk you out of doing stupid things. I don't know. Whatever the reason is, I think there's more to it than that. I mean, because like I said, one of those dangers was that you have a slower recovery time from illness and disease. Well, guess what? Having real friends strengthens your immune system. Again, that's one of those things that does not make sense. But apparently that's what they found. Um, so you recover from disease faster, and you have higher sense of self-esteem and empathy. You guys ever run across somebody in a cashier, maybe it's a cashier at a store, and you're just like, this person doesn't rip that I have a pulse. They're just, this is an exchange of money and items, and that then I'm out of their life, and they're going to forget about me 5 seconds from now. They don't care. Why would they? Or maybe it's like a doctor or a nurse, and they come in, and you can just tell that it's like they're here doing their job. They're going through the motions. Maybe that nurse or whatever doctor's having a bad day, but this is like the profession where they train you how to have what they call a good bedside manner, how to make human connections, how to let your patient know you actually care about them. They get trained in this. And so having real friendships helps us better with empathy. So there's that. And then simple fact is that it creates an ability in us that we have better emotional regulation skills. So when tough times come, we have someone we can turn to. And just the very act of saying whatever it is that is on our hearts helps us feel better. And maybe they do have some good advice. They might have bad advice too, but that depends on the friend. The point is that there's all these reasons, and it comes back down to that simple fact that God looked at Adam and he's looking at us and he's saying, it's not good for you to be alone. You need somebody. You need real connections. And that takes work, that takes effort. I get that. The Bible's got a world to say about this. When you stop and think about, what God told us was the great commandment. What Jesus, when he was asked about it, he said, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. That's a connection right there. But the second is like it. Love your neighbor. You love yourself. Later on, Jesus talking to his disciples, told them, I want you to love each other like I love you. It means we don't get to take shortcuts. We don't get to do the cheap version of love. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes emotional energy. And as an introvert, I get that costs. I know how tiring it can be, but it's so worth it. And you don't need to have 100 close friends. You can have one, two, three, something like that. It can be a small number of people that you enjoy being around. You need those people. We all do. I want to take a look at a few passages here. So uh, let's take a look at Proverbs chapter 17. Proverbs 17, verse 17. He is so on the ball with that.
It's pretty easy to tell when you're about to bring up a verse.
Okay, well, that's not a bad thing. All right, so Proverbs 17:17. A friend is always loyal, and a brother is born to help in time of need. And this is basically what it comes, what we need. We need somebody to know. We need to know that there's a person who's loyal to us. Wait, what?
Well, mine says his brother is born for adversity.
Uh-huh.
That's completely different than to help and harmony. sorry, but that's on you.
Okay, well,
Adversity is what I think of.
adversity is not, but our time of need, that's the kind of time of need it's talking about, is a time of adversity.
Hmm.
That's when you need somebody when hard times come, adversity. So it totally works in my mind, even if it doesn't in yours. But we need to know that there's somebody who's going to be there for us when the hard times come. These days we like to use terms like bestie or BFF or ride or die or whatever else, but it got 100 different ways to say it. Point is that there's that person we know we can rely on, that we can turn to no matter what. And so that's what it's about. And so we need that, but it doesn't end there. I want to move on to the very next chapter. Proverbs 18, very last verse, verse 24, says, there are friends who destroy each other, but a real friend sticks closer than a brother. You ever had that? You ever had friends who were destructive to you? Who were harmful? Maybe they just asked you to do things that you know was stupid. You knew better then, but, then that peer pressure kicks in. And while it may affect us more as, high schoolers, junior hires, or elementary kids, simple fact is it never goes away. We still feel that pressure. When somebody calls us up saying, hey, we wanted to go do X, Y, and Z, you're like, I feel like I need to because they're asking me. And maybe that's a good thing to do. Maybe it's a bad thing to do. Depends on what your X, Y, and Z is. But it's right there. And so there are those friends, but a real friend does stick closer than a brother. It's the person who's there with you no matter what. There's that loyalty, if you want to call it that, but it's just what makes friendship friendship. That you know that they're going to be there and that you're going to be there for them. All right. Let's hit the book of Ecclesiastes. Not very far. I went too far. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 and 10 says, two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person fails, no, it is all. The other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. I might need to try that. Let's read it again. It says, two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But if someone who falls is in real trouble. So this is something we kind of understand on a fundamental level, but we risk it anyway. We're like, okay, I've managed without before. I can do it again. And there's truth in that. If you've managed without before, you can probably manage again. And you just, why? It's better with than without. It's kind of like you got to do work on your car, but you don't have a ratchet set. God's pretty good. You're not going to have the right tool for the job. You may get the job done, but it's going to be a lot harder getting it done. It's the same thing in life. Not to say that your friends are a tool to use, but point is that sometimes that's the right thing for the job. And we need each other. That's what it talks about. And you can go on further in that passage. And he's just talking about this need we have for each other. It's just a visceral thing. And I have had times in my life where I felt I didn't have a close friend. And I've had times when I've had a group of friends, any of which I could go to and had a real connection with and knew they would help me out through whatever came. I've done it both ways. And yes, you can make it without. But it's so much better. Best growth spurt I ever went through in my Christian life as a believer. It happened because I found a group of friends who were on the same path as me. They were all striving to grow, to be more like Jesus. And so we were able to tell each other what our temptations were, what our struggles were. When we failed, when we succeeded, we had someone there cheering for us. Things like that are just, it's like you're out in the desert, or just, it's a hot day, you've been working hard, and you pull up that water and you drink it, and that water's probably 110 degrees. It will give you what you need. You can get by with it. How much better would it be to have something like maybe 40 degrees? You know, it's not frozen, not ice water, but it's like nice and cool. It's just so much better. It's the same sort of, it's just so much better with friends than without. So, and this is, I know this is something I've harped on a lot, but that's what the church is supposed to be. We're supposed to be the friends you can call. And it's not like you go and tell every single person who comes everything that's going on, but you got that friend or two. And that's the goal. And if you don't have that friend or two, I just want to encourage you, just go chase somebody down and say, hey, look, can we go grab coffee together? Or, you know, can I have you over for dinner? Or can we meet for dinner? Or whatever, you know. You do whatever it is you feel like. But the point is that you are trying to make that connection. And it takes time to build it up to that point. But it happens, and it's a beautiful thing. I want to take a look at one last verse in the New Testament. Like I said, this is a subject I could have pulled out 100 different verses for. So, Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. It says, share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. I don't want you to underestimate that verse, because I think what it's talking about there, what he's referring to, is that second commandment. Love your neighbor like you love yourself. So, if we're able to really connect with somebody, then it becomes that person that you can share burdens with. God's looking around at us and he's saying, it's not good for you to be doing life the way that you're doing it, relatively alone. You need to have those connections. Maybe you wait until after the freeze in order to build them. But the point is, get out and do it. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. It's going to take some risk. But you build those connections. You share a little bit more, a little bit deeper, and it just gets easier. I don't know if it ever gets easy, but it gets easier. And so that's what we're talking about. That's what we're after. We want to make sure that we are connected as a church. We want to make sure that each person has somebody that they can confide in. And so, you know, that's what community groups kind of about. It's why we try to get people together every Friday night. I look forward to having more community groups as time goes on. And so if you can't find a group of friends at my house on Friday night, maybe you can go over to so-and-so's house that they're doing on Tuesday nights at 8. That'd be great. But the point is that we get somebody. And we build those real connections. And we have somebody who can call us up and say, hey, look, I know you think you were kind of off today at work. What's up? Is there something bugging you? And you ever had such a close connection with somebody that they could just walk in the room and you can tell just by looking at them? I mean, just split second and you're like, something's wrong. You can just tell. It's not because, something obvious like they're crying. It's like they're trying to hide as well as they can, but they can't because you know them too well. Have you ever had that happen to you where somebody you're going around, you've got something going on, you're trying to put on a happy face for everybody, and somebody comes along and says, hey, look, I can tell something's off. That's the sort of friend we need. That's the sort of connection that God wanted from the beginning. That's what he designed marriage to be. That's what he designed church to be. And there have been times where we've had community group on Friday nights, and next day or maybe later that evening, we'll see a post on social media where a couple people have missed out on community group, but they met up with somebody, and like the instinct is like, hey, you were supposed to come, and it's like, wait, no, check your attitude, Ross. They did their own, you can call it a community group if you want, but they had their own little connection thing going on. And that's cool. That's great. I hope that helped a lot. And if you miss out on Friday nights with a community group to do that, that's fine by me. The point is that we build those connections. And ultimately, the strongest connection we need is with our Father. If we're not connected to Him, there's an element in our life that is just, it's like a plant not getting water. It's withering up slowly but surely. And we need to be connected to Him. And that means that part of our relationships can't be as healthy as they could be. If we're spiritually unhealthy, we can't connect with people on a spiritual level as well. So we need to stay connected to God first and foremost. He is the ultimate best friend. I'm biased, but it's true. So let's go to our best friend and let's pray. Lord God, I want to come to you, and I see the problems all around me, and I get frustrated because we just have this thing in us where we're lonely, but we want to be lonely because it's easier. There's no risk involved. There's no worry about betrayal or anything else. I mean, it's easier in some ways to go through life on our own. God, it is better to go through life with friends. It is simply better. Maybe harder, may take more time, but that's the way He made us. And so just help us. Help us take that time, make that effort, and make those connections. Help us draw close to you first and foremost, God. I want you to be the first phone call for each of us. When something goes south, we go to you and we talk it out first with you. We pour ourselves out to you. Even if we feel like you're the problem, we can still pour that out to you. Just help us to be honest and raw and real about it and just pour ourselves out. And hopefully that person we can go to next. And that person may be the one who helps turn us around and see how you're not the problem. It's just not what we were looking at things wrong or something. I don't know. God, we need you and we need each other. So help us to try. Help us to work out. I thank you for your grace. Thank you for your goodness. In Jesus' name I pray.